Hey everybody, it's Ken and Danielle.
Hello.
And we are here with our advisor, Mauricio Raoul.
How's everyone doing?
Welcome.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
So I'm really excited to chat with you about this because, as you guys know, he's a syndication attorney. Well, he's an attorney, so he's more than just a syndication attorney, but that, I guess, is what you focus on right now.
That's it. Real estate syndications. That's the focus.
So I was like, hey, let's do something on, because there's a lot of money being raised right now. A lot, guys. There's all kinds of dough going all over the place. And so I know that there's problems that you see in the way these syndicators are setting up their funds. And also I want to chat with you additionally, what should an investor look at? Because you got a lot of solicitation on the internet right now. And there's people, of course, saying they're accredited and all that kind of stuff. So what do you see?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, but I totally agree. There's so much money sloshing around the system that we're going through what I call a syndication boom. Everyone and their mother is raising capital, which has been great. But as you said, there's a lot of newbies or unexperienced syndicators that are coming into the picture. So there's been a lot of mistakes that are popping up, a lot that I see.
That's why I know there are. I just don't see them like you see them from a legal standpoint.
Everything's probably going to be okay until things start going south or things flatten out, because I think a lot of people are overpaying for so many properties that it doesn't have to go south for things not to go well. Usually things don't become an issue until investors complain.
Yes.
So as long as investors are happy and not complaining, then it's going to be fine. But probably the two biggest mistakes, errors, things that people are even aware about is, number one, the advertising piece. People are on social media, they're on podcasts, they're on events, seminars, and they're out there promoting their deals when they're not allowed to. Right? It all depends on, not to get too technical, but it depends on the exemption that they're relying on. May allow them to advertise or may not allow them to advertise. And most people rely on an exemption that we'll probably, if you're in this business, hear about this 506B exempt offering, right? And that allows you not to have to register your syndication with the SEC and allows you to do this exempt. If you want to advertise, there are channels that allow you to do that. You can register it with the SEC. There's a couple of exemptions you can rely on.
That's the kind of the litmus test, isn't it? That you have to have a pre-existing relationship.
In order to avoid advertising or being perceived as advertising or general soliciting, you must have what's called a pre-existing substantive relationship with the prospective investor. So that means you've got to know them.
Okay.
You've got to figure out whether they're sophisticated. Do they have enough knowledge and expertise to actually understand your deal and evaluate the risks and the merits? You've got to go through that process. You can't just take somebody off the web.
Is this different if somebody finds a deal and they want a few people to invest in it, so they're just an average Joe person, they don't have a 506 anything, they just want to raise some money, are they allowed to post in a Facebook group?
Another great question. So I will rephrase the question a bit about, which is, what about joint ventures? Because what you're describing is what people want to do is joint ventures. So they come and say, well, I'm not really selling securities. I'm just getting a couple of my buddies together. There's 4, 5, or 6 of them, and we're just pooling our money and we're going to go buy some. Yes, if everybody's coming together and contributing money and everybody's rolling up their sleeves and everybody's working towards generating the returns and everybody's contributing, then yes, if there's 4 or 5 of those people, that's going to be fine. But what always happens is we bring 4 or 5 people together. Maybe 1 or 2 are doing the work, and the rest are just writing a check and going home.
That is actually the reality. You hear people, I'll give you the money, but I don't want any of the phone calls.
But I think I think there's a lot of people like that. We have investors that want to do the sweat equity. They don't have any money, but they're going to find a deal and get a couple of people to invest in it.
They're fine. If they're rolling up their sleeves, doing the sweat equity, that's fine. But if they're going to bring some people along and those people are passive, even if you have 1 passive investor, that's going to be a security.
Oh.
The definition, the layman's term, my definition, because you called me an attorney earlier, Kenny, and I get a little offended by that. I'm the anti-lawyer, as everybody knows, but I am sometimes a wet blanket. But look, anytime you take money from passive investors where the returns are generated by your efforts, meaning you're active and somebody else is passive, that's a security.
Somebody, Joe Schmo, gets 2 passive investors to invest in his deal, and then it's not producing because like you said, if it's producing the return they want, everybody's happy, probably no problem, right? But what if it's not? What if it's falling behind or there's some big issue? What could happen to the person that is putting together the deal?
Great question, and that's when things fall apart. I mean, the SEC doesn't have the budget or the time or really the inclination for a small syndicators who are raising a couple $1 million. They're not going to go actively look and go on social media and stuff. But the minute an investor is not happy with their return, right, that's when they pick up the phone and they call someone. A lot of times it's not even the SEC, it's the state regulator, it's the state where the investor resides. That's who they're going to pick up. They're going to pick up the Arizona, they're going to call the Arizona Department of Securities, and call the Securities and Exchange Commission. They're going to make a complaint. And once that happens, an audit begins. And the SEC will start sending out letters and say, hey, send me all the docs that you provided, what all the information they're looking for. That's going to happen.
As an investor, what should I be looking at? As now looking at it from the other side, what should they be asking questions of the piece of?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the number one thing a passive investor who's considering investing is going to be the due diligence on the sponsor, right? What is their level of experience? Is this the first time they've syndicated? Are they experienced syndicators? Do they have a team behind them? I mean, due diligence on the sponsor is the first thing. Can they pull off the fancy pitch deck that they put together? You always joke about the pitch deck, and I'd love you to tell the story, but can they actually pull that off? It's very easy to put together a nice glossy business plan, executive. Do they have the ability to actually pull that off? That's one thing. Just keep in mind that the pitch deck itself can be easily manipulated. You can come up with numbers, you can make them up however you want. So it's really, really important to understand whether the syndicator has those credentials and that experience to actually pull that off. So that's number one.
On the due diligence side, what are some things, because I know they have to do due diligence. Do they go on the internet? Do they check with the SEC? Is it filed correctly? What are some things, action steps they can take?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you can get your hands on a passive investor who's invested in the deals before, without getting to that person through the syndicator, because obviously the syndicator is going to give you their best investors. But if you can find a way of finding people, which these days isn't that hard, somebody who's been invested in the deal, then that obviously lends a ton of credibility. You can go on the SEC does keep track also of all of the offerings that have actually been made by the specific syndicator, so you can go back and see if it's been done properly, how many they've done, because again, you can kind of make anything up.
So that's important.
Hey, I've done 100 of these. Well, you can actually go check. You can go on the SEC website, the thing called EDGAR, EDGAR, and check to see every single syndication that particular sponsor's made.
That's why you really want to do your research and do your due diligence as an investor. You want to make sure that you're investing with somebody that's done this before and has a track record here. And a lot of this stuff should be buttoned up. So before we put an offering out, we already have a term sheet for the loan. We already have all the construction, all those things are all bid out. We know what it's going to cost to replace the roof. We know what it's going to cost to replace the parking lot. Those numbers in our business plan are real. They're actually come with an actual bid. So all that stuff's done before we put it out. But not everyone does this. So sometimes they're like, we think it's going to be $1 million, right? And then it's $1.7 million, right? It happens all the time. So you have to have all that stuff. Guys, these are questions you can ask.
Yep.
Do you have a bid here? Is this a slush fund and you're trying to manage to it? Or, are these real things? And have you done due diligence? Have you been on the roofs? Have you checked all these different things? Have you walked all the units? And do you know if all the appliances, all the carpet and all that kind of stuff, and there's any damage or repair? Are there any city or county issues, any fire issues, and any plumbing, any electrical, any of those kinds of things? Even properties that had high losses, properties that have had high losses come with consequences.
Yeah, we should put together a little checklist of the top
100,
top 50 questions to ask a syndicator or something.
I get a ton of those. That'd be a fun one to do. Let's do that.
I'll do it.
Okay, that sounds good.
I'll lean on you.
Well, Mauricio, thank you. This is great to look at it, one from the syndicator side and from the investor side. I appreciate you as always.
Thanks, Ken, for having me. Thanks,
Cheers.
Daniil.